So, our topic today is perfect competition in the short run. And you should have covered chapter 9 at this point already. You learned the difference between short run and long run. Short run is that time horizon where everything is variable except you have a fixed plant size. Long run is the time frame in which everything is variable. So, you also learned about four main types of market structures. We're going to focus mainly on two of them in this last portion of the unit. And if we put them on a continuum, you've got pure or perfect competition on one end. That would be the market structure that has the most competition. Then you have monopoly on the other end that has no competition. And the other two, monopolistic competition and oligopoly, fall somewhere in between. So we're going to talk mostly about those structures that are on either end. And then we'll briefly touch on the two in the middle. So the notes today come from the beginning of chapter 10. If you finished the guided reading already, then this should sound somewhat familiar. But you can go through the video, take the notes down. Remember, your all of your quizzes and tests from here on out will be open note because they're take home. So the better notes you have, the more they're likely to help you on those assessments. All right. So first of all, when we're talking about businesses or firms, their main number one goal is to maximize their profit, or short of that, to minimize their loss. We're seeing that currently with all of the ways that businesses are coming up with ways of continuing to sell things despite the fact that we're in a shutdown. Curbside service. Maybe Irvin the squirrel from Urban Swirl visited your house with some frozen yogurt delivery. All of those things are designed right now to minimize the loss that those businesses have because they can't operate in person. So keep that in mind as we move through the rest of these notes. Overarching goal always to maximize profit, or if you're not making a profit, to minimize your loss. So we talked about costs in chapter 9. That's one part of the profit scenario. The other part is revenue, or the amount of money that you bring in. So there's three different types of revenue that you need to know for perfect competition. The first one is average revenue. And in this market structure only, it's also known as demand. It will be the same as the demand curve. Price, same. It'll be a horizontal curve at the price of the item. It's also known as marginal revenue because here your revenue or your price will be fixed because this is a market price in perfect competition. Therefore, your average is going to be the same as your marginal. And we'll look at that more closely when we look at the graphs in just a second. Basically, your average revenue, the definition would be your amount of revenue that you're earning per unit. And you can find the answer to that by looking at your total revenue divided by quantity. This is also going to be your price because your price is fixed. So, for example, if you have a price of $20 on a product and you make one product, your average revenue is going to be $20. If you make two products and sell them, that'd be a total of 40 divided by 2, it's $20. Sell three, $60 divided by three, $20, and so forth. So every time you sell an extra item, you're making 20 more dollars. And so that's your marginal revenue. And your average revenue is going to be that same $20. You also need to know what total revenue is. Its name is sort of self explanatory. It's the total amount of revenue you bring in. You can find this by looking at the price times the quantity of items that you sell. So if you sell four and it's worth $20, then your total revenue would be $80. Marginal revenue, again, is going to be the extra revenue that you earn from making one more unit. So if you take your marginal revenue, you can find it by looking at your change in total revenue divided by the change in quantity. Now, we're going to be looking at increments of change of 1. So your change in total revenue is going to be your numerator, and 1 will always be your denominator, just like in the last chapter. So another way to look at marginal revenue is that it's just the price. Every time you sell one more, if the price is fixed at $20, you're making $20 more. That's your marginal revenue. So if we were to graph these things out, this is what you'd end up with. On the y-axis, You've got your total revenue numbers here, or also we can say that the price is on this axis. And then down at the bottom, you have the quantity demanded, or the amount of items that are sold. So notice that your demand, marginal revenue, average revenue curve is this horizontal line down here at the bottom. It stays the same because firms in perfectly competitive markets have to take the market price. When we said they were price takers in chapter 9, this is what we were talking about. So our demand curve is perfectly elastic. It's this horizontal line. And then our total revenue has an increasing slope, a positive slope, because every time you sell one more item, you're making that much more money. In this case, we're saying that the price is $131. Every time we sell one more item, we make 131 additional dollars. So that is our demand, our marginal revenue, our average revenue, also our price. All right, so here's another way to look at it. Let me move myself over there so you can see everything. So as you look at this chart, you see column 1 is your total product or your output. Column 2 would be average fixed cost. Column 3 is average variable cost. Column 4 is average total cost. Column 5 is marginal cost. And then the second half of column 5, I never noticed that was numbered differently, is your marginal revenue, also known as your price. And then the last column is your total economic profit or loss. So we are looking on this chart for where your profit is maximized. And there's a hard and fast rule with that. And it's stated up here at the top. Your profit will be maximized where your marginal revenue is equal to your marginal cost, or closest to your marginal cost without going over. What that means is the benefit of adding one more unit of output to production is exactly equal to the cost of adding one more unit to production. It doesn't mean you're breaking even, because your profit is based on total revenue, but that's where your profit will be maximized. So if you look at this chart, take a moment, see if you can identify where you think marginal cost and marginal revenue are equal. You can pause the video if that helps. Hopefully you arrived at the conclusion that a total product of 9 would be your answer, because at that point, our marginal cost is 130 and our marginal revenue is 131. This is the closest they are to being equal without our marginal cost outweighing our marginal revenue, which is what happens if we add that 10th unit of product. We can also figure out our total profit or loss. Here it's $2.99, which again shows that the profit is maximized. We can figure that out by taking our price, 131, times our total product, which is 9, and then subtracting our total cost. So at that point, at 9 units, our average total cost is $97.98. We'd have to multiply that by 9 in order to get our total cost. If you take then your total revenue divided by total cost, that's where this 299 number comes in. Okay, so all of that chart that you just looked at can be graphed out, and it ends up looking like this. Hopefully some of these things look familiar already. We've talked about 3 of the curves that you see. Actually, we've talked about all 4, but you already did some work with 3 of the curves that you see here. So this first kind of U-shaped curve, that's our average total cost curve. Then below it is our average variable cost. Remember, the distance between those two is equal to your average fixed cost, which for perfect competition, we won't be graphing those out. Those 2 costs, total and variable, are the ones that we'll be graphing. And then you also have the Nike swoosh, the marginal cost curve that goes through the minimum point of the average total and average variable costs. What you're looking for on this graph is where that marginal cost curve is equal to marginal revenue. This curve right here, this horizontal line at your price, that is the demand curve, the average revenue curve, that marginal revenue curve that we talked about earlier. And so where that curve crosses your Nike swoosh, that's where your profit is going to be maximized. So notice that at that point, we have the maximum vertical distance between our price and our average total cost. And so what that means is this largest vertical distance means the largest amount of profit. If you draw a line from that intersection down to average total cost curve and then over to your y-axis, that area of that rectangle becomes your economic profit. So what we're looking at there is that $31, which is the vertical distance from 100 to 131, multiplied by 9. If we take those two numbers, multiply them together, you will end up with your economic profit. So in this case, what we want to see is that the price is greater than our average total cost in order for a company to be earning an economic profit. Again, I have it noted for you down here at the bottom that the economic profit is equal to the vertical distance above the average total cost curve. That would be your per unit profit. If you multiply that by the total number of units, that's where you get your total profit. All right, so that's as far as we're going to go today. The activity that is for tomorrow is to complete some practice. And in Canvas on the module for this week, it is called Perfect Competition Practice 1 or just Perfect Competition 1, something like that. It's your assignment for the next day in class. If you want to move ahead to that while it's fresh in your mind, you can certainly do that. All of the information that we just went over comes from Chapter 10, pages 220 to 227. Hopefully you've read those already if you did the guided reading for Chapter 10 first. But if you need to look back for some additional guidance, that's where you will find it for this chapter.